Over the decades, Dragon Ball has had countless interesting setups. Some of them turned into legendary story arcs, but others were left behind and never paid off. Stick with me until the end of the video so you can understand all about it. What's up everyone? How it's going? Welcome back to Dragon Dao. If we tried to list every Dragon Ball setup that went nowhere, the list would be enormous. So I picked 5 cases for us to go over in this video. So without further ado, let's get into them. Let's start with the catalyst for the entire Z era, the moment that changed Dragon Ball forever, the arrival of Raditz. Everyone remembers that, but a lot of people forget why Raditz spent months traveling through space. It wasn't because he missed his little brother, whom he actually looked down on for being weak. What he needed was manpower. The Saiyans had found a valuable planet, but it was too difficult for just the 3 of them to conquer, so Raditz remembered Kakarot. However, after Raditz's death, this mysterious planet completely disappears from the narrative. Vegeta and Nappa never discuss how Raditz's death would affect the planned invasion. And so, the story never answered what planet they wanted to conquer. Fans began speculating about which planet it could have been. The planet Vegeta and Nappa were already on: Namek, Zune, Yardrat. Some are more likely than others, but none fit perfectly with the story Raditz told. The narrative promised a powerful planet, but knowing Toriyama, I'd say it never truly existed. Toriyama never had a fully developed idea for it. What he needed was a reason for Raditz to show up, reveal Goku's origins, and kick off the Z era. But as soon as Raditz dies and Vegeta and Nappa become interested in the Dragon Balls, that planet stops serving any narrative purpose. It's never mentioned again because it wasn't a real planet, but rather a plot device. On top of that, Dragon Ball Super makes the existence of this mysterious planet even harder to reconcile. That's because it retroactively complicates the very idea of planetary commerce. Shin reveals that after the destruction of Sadala, Planet Vegeta, and Namek, there are only 28 planets with intelligent life in Universe 7. That creates a massive inconsistency with the old logic of Frieza's empire. If the universe was really that empty, who were these planets being sold to? Who was buying them? Around 30 planets with intelligent life is far too low a number to sustain a universe-wide planetary trade. Anyway, this was the first setup without a payoff in the Z era. When Trunks tells Goku about the androids, he describes them as the ultimate killing machine. But when the androids finally showed up, Torishima asked if the long-awaited villains were really just a fatso and a geezer. Toriyama went ahead and created 16, 17, and 18, young and stylish. But then Torishima said they were just a bunch of brats. But despite the editors complaining, Dr. Gero was terrified at the thought of 16 being awakened, saying he could destroy the world, and that they would be signing their own death sentences by doing so. This was a genius scientist talking about his own creation, and those words only make sense if 16 truly was an uncontrollable threat. The audience expected a Broly-like android. For once, Toei's silhouettes would actually make sense. When 16 was awakened, 17 and 18 asked why Dr. Gero was so desperate to stop them from waking him up and why he had said it would be a death sentence. And 16 simply gave them a serious look, then a slight smile, and refused to answer. Not long after, when 17 says it would be better to take a car to look for Goku, 18 rhetorically asks whether 16 understood that, since it was a guy thing and he must have been human before becoming an android. But 16 says no, that he was built from scratch with no human base. Right then and there, 17 finds that strange and thinks to himself, if Dr. Gero had the technology to create powerful androids with infinite energy from scratch, why would he go back to using a human base like before? Combined with Dr. Gero's lines, this question raises some issues that were left unanswered. Issues that could have hidden a completely different purpose and development than what we ended up seeing for 16. Decades later, Dragon Ball Superhero stated that Android 16 was built in the image of Dr. Gero's son. When asked why he had kept 16 around, since he had discarded all the androids from 15 on back, Gero said it was because he intended to fix him. So this son explanation actually makes some sense up to that point. But if 16 was the beloved son, why was Gero terrified of him in the lab? Superhero explanation doesn't resolve the terror. If 16 was peaceful, Gero would have been afraid of him being useless, not dangerous. Just like what happened with Android 8, who became Goku's friend. The absolute terror he showed in the lab only makes sense if the original 16 was an extermination machine. Gero's terror was left unexplained, and 17's questioning about mechanical versus human construction died right there. Android 16 started out as a killer machine and ended up as a guy who talked to birds. Universe 6. A universe where the Saiyan race avoided annihilation, evolved differently, and still lives on their original home planet, Sadala. After Vegeta's victory, Kaba says that the Saiyan King was a strong and proud man just like him. So, Vegeta asks to meet him someday, and Kaba says it's a deal. In the Tournament of Power, Vegeta promises Kaba that he'll use the Super Dragon Balls to restore his universe, since Kaba had promised to take him to visit Sadala. The narrative promise was clear, and it fit perfectly with Vegeta's redemption arc in Dragon Ball Super. This created a very interesting opportunity, an entire arc focused on Vegeta, since Goku never cared much about his race, aside from avenging them against Frieza. Vegeta spent most of his life as a proud prince, but a prince without a people. It would be interesting to see how he would react to being reunited with his race. But after the Tournament of Power ended, Super moved on without ever touching the subject again. The manga continued with the Moro, Granola, and superhero sagas, and the promise of a visit to Sadala was never paid off. This is one of the biggest theories in Dragon Ball Super. If you were online between 2017 and 2018, you know about the theory surrounding the angels, because the anime made a conscious effort to portray them as antagonistic figures with hidden motives. The moment that got the fandom theorizing was the first universe elimination in the Tournament of Power. Everyone in the arena was shocked to see what had been promised actually happening in practice, an entire universe being erased. But the angel of that universe, Mojito, did something curious, to say the least. He smirked in a cynical and sinister way after watching his universe cease to exist. And in the following episode, he exaggerated that expression even more. If it had just stopped there, it would have already been enough for all kinds of speculation, but there was more. The strongest signs came from the Grand Minister. He seemed to take pleasure in announcing the elimination. The camera angles were often from the bottom up, constantly conveying a sense of threat. His face was frequently shadowed, a device often associated with characters of ambiguous morality or antagonism. These expressions were anything but neutral. He looked like the manipulator taking advantage of the Zeno's childishness to wipe out the multiverse for some hidden agenda. All of these elements functioned as a legitimate setup within the anime's narrative, but they were promises that were never paid off. And if there was never any real intention of developing this theme, the fault isn't ours for noticing and questioning it, but Toei's for baiting us. In the manga, Mojito's expression is much less sinister. It just looked like the face of someone tired of carrying a lousy universe like that. And in the following sagas, the angels were reinforced as purely neutral, completely invalidating all the suspense built up in the anime. The threat that the close-ups and sinister smiles suggested never came anywhere close to happening. At the beginning of the Daima adventure, Goku and the others came across a shop that sold all kinds of items, and what stood out the most were the so-called Medibug. They had several different uses, such as healing burns and headache, improving your skin, restoring energy like a Senzu bean, or even performing a fusion. And that last one was far too interesting, because it was a third method of fusion, different from the fusion dance and the Potara earring, which would probably have its own rules. And even more interesting than that, the illustration of the fusion bug suggested that they could fuse 3 people together. What would this new character's power, personality, and design be like? Everyone who was still watching Daima by episode 4 was curious to find out. Goku bought several of those bugs, and the adventure continued. But what happened to the fusion bugs after that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Episode 17 arrived, and everyone joined forces to face the final villain. At one point, Goma hits Goku, sending him crashing into a rock. As a result, the pouch containing all the items he had bought at the shop fell out of his clothes. Shortly afterward, once everyone had been knocked down, Vegeta asks Goku about the bugs, and he realizes that the pouch had disappeared. The battle against Goma continued through episode 20. Super Saiyan 4 appeared. They turned back into adults, and in the end, Goma was defeated without any fusion. And with that single act, the script killed off a setup that had been planted more than 10 episodes earlier. There's a narrative principle stating that every element in a story should be necessary. So, if the fusion bugs were introduced, they should have been used at some point. It makes no sense to introduce that element if the characters were never going to fuse. It makes absolutely no sense. In other words, Daima created hype for nothing, burying every expectation it had created itself. But now I want to know from you, what do you think about all of this? Do you remember any others that were left off this list? Comment your opinion down below. If you made it this far, you probably enjoyed it. So I want to ask you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to keep following discussions like this one. And here on the screen, 2 more videos are going to appear that I'm sure you'll like. I'll see you in the next video here on Dragon Dao.